Welcome to Topical Economics. If you haven't subscribed yet, then please subscribe now to not miss any new content updates. In today's video, we are diving into the fascinating topic of population economics. I will be walking you through a series of multiple-choice questions, where we will not only identify the correct answers, but also break down why the other options are incorrect. Whether you're studying for exams or just curious about how population factors shape economies, this video will help you build a clearer understanding of key concepts like birth rates, migration, and demographic trends. So, let's get started and explore how these factors play a vital role in shaping the economy. Starting with the first question. What is the usual effect of net immigration for a high-income country? A. An increase in the size of the labor force. B. A rise in the average age of the population. C. Lower economic growth. D. Reduced demand for housing. Reference, 2022 October, November, version 3. The correct answer for this question is option A, an increase in the size of the labor force. Net immigration typically leads to an increase in the size of the labor force because immigrants contribute to the working-age population and often enter the workforce. This results in a larger pool of workers available for employment, which can support economic growth and productivity in a high-income country. Analyzing the other options. Option B, a rise in the average age of the population. Immigration tends to lower, not raise, the average age of the population in high-income countries. Immigrants are often younger, in their working years, compared to the native population, especially in countries with aging demographics. Therefore, immigration is more likely to decrease the average age rather than increase it. Next, option C, lower economic growth. Immigration usually promotes economic growth, rather than hindering it. By increasing the labor force and contributing to demand for goods and services, immigrants help drive economic activity. They also bring skills, innovation, and diversity that can enhance productivity and support long-term growth. Therefore, it's unlikely to result in lower economic growth. Lastly, option D, reduced demand for housing. Immigration increases demand for housing, not reduces it. More people moving into a country means there is a need for more homes, whether through renting or buying. In fact, high levels of immigration can place additional pressure on the housing market, especially in cities where immigrants tend to settle, leading to higher demand and potentially higher prices. Moving to the second question. What is likely to cause an immediate decrease in the size of the labor force? A. A fall in the average size of families. B. A fall in the birth rate. C. A reduction in the age of retirement. D. An increase in net immigration. Reference, 2022 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option C. A reduction in the age of retirement means that individuals will leave the workforce earlier, which would cause an immediate decrease in the size of the labor force. As people retire earlier, there is a more immediate drop in the number of people available for work, reducing the labor supply in the short term. Analyzing the other options. Option A, a fall in the average size of families, may affect long-term population growth and the future size of the labor force, but it does not have an immediate impact. The size of families is not directly related to the immediate availability of workers in the labor market, since family size primarily affects the number of young people entering the workforce in the future. Next, option B, a fall in the birth rate. While a fall in the birth rate will eventually lead to a smaller future labor force as fewer children are born and fewer people enter the workforce, it does not cause an immediate decrease. It's a long-term trend that takes years or decades to affect the working-age population. Lastly, option D, an increase in net immigration, would actually lead to an increase, not a decrease, in the size of the labor force. More immigrants typically join the workforce, which expands the labor pool, particularly in high-income countries experiencing labor shortages. Therefore, this would not decrease the size of the labor force. Moving to the third question. The birth rate and death rate in a country are the same. What is likely to happen if there is a decrease in the birth rate, while the death rate and migration remain the same? A. Population structure will remain the same. B. Population will decrease. C. The standard of living will decrease. D. The working population will increase. Reference, 2017 October-November version 3. The correct answer for this question is option B. Population will decrease. If the birth rate decreases while the death rate and migration remain the same, there will be fewer births than deaths over time, leading to a decline in the population. Since the death rate remains unchanged and there are fewer people being born, the population will gradually shrink. Even if migration is not a factor in this case, a declining birth rate without a compensating factor would result in overall population decrease. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Population structure will remain the same. While the population may still stay stable for a while, a decrease in the birth rate will eventually change the population structure over time. Fewer births will lead to a larger proportion of elderly people in the population as the younger generation shrinks. So, the population structure will not remain the same, it will likely become more top-heavy with older people. Next, option C. The standard of living will decrease. A decrease in the birth rate does not automatically imply that the standard of living will decrease. In fact, depending on other factors, like economic growth, technological development, or changes in productivity, the standard of living could remain stable or even increase. A lower birth rate might lead to fewer people to support, potentially improving living conditions, especially if the working-age population remains sufficient. Lastly, option D. The working population will increase. A decrease in the birth rate would actually likely lead to a decline in the working population over time. With fewer children being born, there will be fewer young people entering the workforce in the future. Unless immigration or other factors increase the number of working-age people, the working population will not increase, it will shrink or stabilize as the older generation retires. Moving to the fourth question. What is most likely to cause an increase in the population growth of a developing country? A. A decrease in immigration. B. A decrease in the birth rate. C. A decrease in the death rate. D. A decrease in the standard of living. Reference, 2017 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. A decrease in the death rate is the most likely cause of an increase in population growth in a developing country. When the death rate falls due to improvements in healthcare, sanitation, nutrition, and overall living conditions, more people survive, leading to an increase in the population. If fewer people are dying, the overall population size will naturally grow, even if the birth rate remains the same. This is one of the key drivers of population growth in developing countries. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A decrease in immigration. While changes in immigration can affect population growth, a decrease in immigration would typically result in a slower population growth, not an increase. In the context of a developing country, where the birth rate tends to be higher, immigration is not as significant a factor in increasing population growth as the death rate or birth rate are. So, a decrease in immigration would not directly lead to a significant increase in population growth. Next, option B. A decrease in the birth rate would typically slow down population growth, not increase it. If fewer children are being born, population growth would decrease or stabilize over time, even if the death rate stays the same. A lower birth rate is generally a sign of population stabilization, which is the opposite of an increase in population growth. Lastly, option D. A decrease in the standard of living would most likely reduce population growth. If the quality of life decreases, e.g., due to poverty, lack of healthcare, or economic challenges, it could lead to higher mortality rates and lower fertility rates, thereby reducing population growth. A decrease in the standard of living is generally associated with slower population growth, not faster. Moving to the fifth question. What is the effect on an economy of net emigration of people aged 20 to 40? A. A more mobile labor force. B. An aging population. C. Higher government tax revenue. D. Rising house prices. Reference, 2021 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option B. An aging population. Net emigration of people aged 20 to 40 would likely lead to an aging population in the economy. This is because individuals in the 20 to 40 age group are typically in their working and reproductive years, so if a large number of them leave, the proportion of older individuals in the population increases. Fewer young, working-age people means that the population's median age rises, contributing to demographic aging. Analyzing the other options. Option A: a more mobile labor force. While emigration might make the labor force more mobile, since people are moving between countries, it doesn't directly lead to a more mobile labor force in the domestic economy. The question is about the overall economic effect, and net emigration of young adults would reduce the pool of available workers, potentially making the labor force less stable rather than more mobile. Next, option C: higher government tax revenue. Net emigration of young working-age people is likely to reduce government tax revenue, not increase it. Young adults typically contribute to income tax and other forms of taxation through employment. When these people leave, the tax base shrinks, potentially leading to lower government revenues, especially if they are replacing native workers who pay taxes. Lastly, option D: rising house prices. Net emigration typically reduces demand for housing, not increases it. If people are leaving, fewer individuals will be looking to buy or rent homes, which would reduce demand and could even lead to falling house prices, especially in areas that experience significant outflows of people. In contrast, rising house prices generally occur when there is an increase in population or demand for housing. Moving to the sixth question. The birth rate in a country is higher than the death rate. What might prevent the country's population from rising? A. Emigration is greater than immigration. B. The birth rate is falling. C. The country's medical care improves. D. The death rate is rising. Reference: 2021 October-November, version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A: emigration is greater than immigration. Even if the birth rate is higher than the death rate, emigration being greater than immigration could prevent the population from rising. Emigration involves people leaving the country, and if more people are leaving than are entering, it can offset the natural population growth from the higher birth rate. This would result in a stable or even declining population, despite a higher birth rate. Analyzing the other options. Option B: the birth rate is falling. While a falling birth rate could eventually slow down population growth or even lead to a decline in population, the statement in the question suggests that the birth rate is still higher than the death rate. So, as long as the birth rate remains higher than the death rate, population growth should continue. This option doesn't directly address a situation where population growth is prevented despite a higher birth rate. Next, option C. The country's medical care improves. Improvements in medical care would likely lead to a lower death rate, not a higher one. This would generally support population growth, not prevent it. Better healthcare often results in longer life expectancy, which would typically lead to a higher population, not a decrease. Lastly, option D. The death rate is rising. A rising death rate could reduce the rate of population growth, but as long as the birth rate is still higher than the death rate, the population would still increase over time. The question implies that the birth rate exceeds the death rate, so a rising death rate alone wouldn't be sufficient to prevent population growth unless the death rate rises above the birth rate. Moving to the seventh question. What condition in an economy would encourage immigration of labor? A. High cost of housing. B. Preference for domestic over foreign qualifications. C. Reduced quotas for foreign workers. D. Shortage of skilled workers. Reference: 2021 May-June version 3. The correct answer for this question is option D. Shortage of skilled workers in an economy creates a strong incentive for immigration. If there is a demand for workers with specific skills that cannot be met by the domestic workforce, employers are likely to encourage immigration to fill those gaps. Skilled workers from abroad may be attracted by job opportunities and higher wages, which can help alleviate the shortage in the economy. Analyzing the other options. Option A. High cost of housing. While a high cost of housing might deter some potential immigrants, it is not a primary factor encouraging immigration. In fact, high housing costs might make a country less attractive for immigrants, as it could lower their quality of life or make it difficult to afford living there. Therefore, a high cost of housing typically discourages, rather than encourages, immigration. Next, option B, preference for domestic over foreign qualifications, would likely reduce immigration, not encourage it. If employers prioritize domestic qualifications and make it more difficult for foreign workers to get jobs, it would create barriers for immigrants and make it less attractive for them to move to that country. Lastly, option C, reduced quotas for foreign workers. Reduced quotas for foreign workers would restrict immigration, not encourage it. If a country limits the number of foreign workers it allows, this would reduce the number of immigrants, especially in industries that rely on foreign labor to meet demand. Moving to the 8th question. The United Nations, UN, predicts that the population in low-income countries will increase. What is likely to be a cause of this? A. Climate change will lead to lower food output and starvation. B. Improved education for girls will lead to a small decline in birth rates. C. Increasing numbers of people will migrate to higher-income countries. D. Modern medicine and sanitation will lead to a rapid decline in death rates. Reference, 2021 February-March version 2. The correct answer for this question is option D. Modern medicine and sanitation will lead to a rapid decline in death rates. The main reason for population growth in low-income countries is often a decline in death rates due to improvements in modern medicine and sanitation. When healthcare and sanitation systems improve, mortality, especially infant and child mortality, tends to decrease. This means more people survive into adulthood, leading to a population increase even if birth rates remain high. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Climate change will lead to lower food output and starvation. While climate change may affect food security and lead to adverse effects like lower food output in some areas, it is unlikely to be a primary cause of population increase. In fact, food shortages and starvation tend to increase mortality rates, which would not contribute to population growth. The prediction of population increase is more related to improvements in health and survival, rather than negative impacts like food shortages. Next, option B. Improved education for girls will lead to a small decline in birth rates. Improved education for girls is indeed an important factor in reducing birth rates over time, as educated women tend to have fewer children. However, the question specifically asks for a reason for population increase, and while education may help reduce birth rates in the long run, it is not the cause of immediate population growth. In fact, as birth rates decline, population growth would eventually slow. Lastly, option C. Increasing numbers of people will migrate to higher-income countries. Migration from low-income to high-income countries might be a response to economic opportunities but would not contribute to the population increase in the low-income countries themselves. If people migrate away, it would likely lead to a decrease in the population of the sending country, not an increase. Moving to the 9th question. What is meant by an optimum population for a country? A. A population that balances its birth rate and its death rate. A population that maximizes output per head. C. A population that results in fewest negative externalities. D. A population that uses all resources available. Reference, 2020 Specimen version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B, a population that maximizes output per head. The concept of an optimum population refers to the ideal number of people in a country that leads to the highest possible level of economic well-being or output per person. It is the population size that maximizes the economic output or welfare of the country while efficiently using its resources. The optimum population results in the best balance between the working population, available resources, and technological capability, leading to high productivity and quality of life. Analyzing the other options. Option A, a population that balances its birth rate and its death rate, describes a stable population, where the population remains constant over time, not an optimum population. While a stable population might be a goal for some economies, it does not necessarily maximize economic output per person, which is the key idea behind the concept of an optimum population. Next, option C, a population that results in fewest negative externalities. While minimizing negative externalities, like pollution or resource depletion, is an important aspect of sustainable development, the optimum population is not defined by the reduction of externalities alone. The optimum population is more about maximizing the economic potential of the country and its people, though fewer negative externalities might be a side effect of reaching the optimal population. Lastly, option D, a population that uses all resources available. While using all available resources might sound efficient, it does not necessarily lead to an optimum population. Overusing resources can lead to environmental degradation or unsustainable practices, which can hurt long-term economic well-being. The optimum population is about efficient use of resources to maximize output, not necessarily using every resource to its fullest extent. Moving to the 10th question. What does a population pyramid of a country show? A. Its age and sex distribution. B. Its employment pattern. C. Its income distribution. D. Its migration pattern. Reference, 2020 Specimen Version 1. The correct answer for this question is option A, its age and sex distribution. A population pyramid visually represents the age and sex distribution of a country's population. The pyramid typically shows the number or percentage of people in different age groups, with males and females represented on either side of the pyramid. The shape of the pyramid can give insights into demographic trends such as birth rates, life expectancy, and the overall age structure of the population. Analyzing the other options. Option B, its employment pattern. A population pyramid does not show employment patterns. While certain age groups may be more likely to be employed, such as working-age adults, the pyramid itself does not provide specific data on employment, occupations, or labor force participation. Employment patterns are typically shown in other types of economic or labor market reports. Next, option C, its income distribution. A population pyramid does not show the income distribution of a country. While it shows the age and sex distribution, income distribution would require different data, such as income brackets or distribution curves that illustrate how wealth is spread across the population. Lastly, option D, its migration pattern. A population pyramid does not directly reveal migration patterns, although changes in the pyramid's shape over time may reflect migration trends, e.g., a larger number of working-age people entering the country. However, migration patterns would be better analyzed through migration-specific data, such as net migration rates or migration flow charts. Moving to the 11th question. What causes the birth rate to fall in a country? A. Fewer women work. B. Infant mortality rates rise. C. Medical supplies and healthcare improve. D. The optimum population increases. Reference, 2020 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option C. Medical supplies and healthcare improve. Improvements in medical supplies and healthcare typically lead to a decline in the birth rate in a country. As healthcare improves, especially in maternal and child health, infant mortality decreases, leading families to have fewer children. When families are more confident that their children will survive into adulthood, they tend to have fewer children. Additionally, better healthcare often leads to greater access to family planning services, which directly contributes to lower birth rates. Analyzing the other options. Option A, fewer women work. The relationship between women working and the birth rate is complex. In many cases, more women in the workforce tends to correlate with a lower birth rate, not the other way around. As women become more educated and participate in the workforce, they often delay childbearing and may choose to have fewer children. Therefore, the falling birth rate is not caused by fewer women working, but often by more women working and gaining access to education and career opportunities. Next, option B, infant mortality rates rise. If infant mortality rates rise, families may have more children to compensate for the loss of infants, as they may not be as confident in their children's survival. High infant mortality tends to encourage higher birth rates, not lower them. Therefore, a rise in infant mortality rates would typically increase the birth rate, not decrease it. Lastly, option D. The optimum population increases. An increase in the optimum population does not directly lead to a fall in the birth rate. The optimum population is the ideal population size that maximizes economic and social well-being, but it doesn't necessarily correlate with birth rates. Birth rates are influenced more by factors like access to healthcare, education, and family planning than by population size per se. Moving to the 12th question. In Botswana, better healthcare has meant that birth rates have been falling faster than death rates. Also, the number of children born, on average, to each woman has declined from 6.4 to 3.2. What may be concluded from this information? A. Government spending on education will need to increase. B. Medical improvements have resulted in falling infant mortality rates. C. There will be a decline in income for each person working. D. There will, in the long run, be an increase in the working population. Reference, 2019 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option B. Medical improvements have resulted in falling infant mortality rates. The information provided indicates that birth rates are falling faster than death rates and that the average number of children born to each woman has declined from 6.4 to 3.2. This suggests that better healthcare is likely leading to lower infant mortality rates, as families no longer feel the need to have as many children to ensure that some survive into adulthood. When infant and child mortality rates decrease, people typically have fewer children because they are more confident that their children will survive. This is a common pattern in countries with improving healthcare systems. Analyzing the other options. Option A. Government spending on education will need to increase. While education may indeed be a priority in the long run, especially if the population structure shifts toward a larger proportion of young people, the information provided doesn't directly suggest that government spending on education will need to increase. The data focuses on healthcare improvements and birth rates, not specifically on education spending. Next, option C. There will be a decline in income for each person working. A decline in the birth rate and the reduction in the number of children born per woman do not necessarily imply a decline in income for workers. In fact, in many cases, as a population stabilizes or decreases, there can be a higher per capita income, because a smaller population can lead to more efficient use of resources and higher productivity. So, this option does not directly follow from the information given. Lastly, option D. There will, in the long run, be an increase in the working population. The decline in the birth rate and the average number of children per woman suggests that, in the long run, the working population may actually decrease or grow at a slower rate. With fewer children being born, there will be fewer people entering the workforce in the future. If death rates remain low, the population may age, leading to a higher dependency ratio, fewer workers per elderly person. This would not lead to a net increase in the working population, but rather a potential slowdown in growth. Moving to the 13th question. In a country the birth rate increased but the population decreased. What could have happened to other factors to cause this? A. A fall in infant mortality but no change in the death rate. B. A rise in net immigration but no change in the death rate. C. No change in migration but the death rate rose. D. The death rate fell with no change in migration. Reference, 2019 May-June version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. No change in migration but the death rate rose. If the birth rate increases but the population still decreases, it suggests that the death rate must have risen significantly enough to outweigh the increase in births. This would cause the overall population to decline, even though more people are being born. A rise in the death rate could be due to factors like poor healthcare, disease outbreaks, or an aging population, which would increase mortality even if the birth rate is rising. Analyzing the other options. Option A. A fall in infant mortality but no change in the death rate. A fall in infant mortality typically leads to lower death rates and would likely increase the population, not decrease it. If infant mortality falls but the death rate remains unchanged overall, the population would still be more likely to increase due to fewer children dying. This wouldn't explain why the population is decreasing, despite an increased birth rate. Next, option B, a rise in net immigration but no change in the death rate. A rise in net immigration would actually increase the population, not decrease it. Immigrants add to the population, so if the birth rate rises and immigration also increases, it would not explain a population decrease. This option conflicts with the premise that the population is declining. Lastly, option D, the death rate fell with no change in migration. If the death rate fell, the population should increase, not decrease. A falling death rate would imply that fewer people are dying, so even if the birth rate rises slightly, the population would still tend to grow. Therefore, this option does not match the scenario of a population decrease. Moving to the 14th question. What will lead to an aging population if other factors remain unchanged? A. A fall in the birth rate. B. A rise in the death rate. C. An increase in the age of retirement. D. An increase in the state pension. Reference, 2018 October-November version 2. The correct answer for this question is option A. A fall in the birth rate is one of the main factors leading to an aging population. When fewer children are born, the proportion of elderly people in the population increases over time, as the younger generation shrinks. As a result, the population ages, because there are fewer young people to balance the growing number of older individuals. This trend continues unless offset by higher immigration or other factors. Analyzing the other options. Option B, a rise in the death rate, would likely decrease the overall population size and would not necessarily lead to an aging population. If more people die, including older individuals, it could reduce the number of elderly people in the population. This would counteract the effects of an aging population, as it would result in fewer elderly people overall. Next, option C, an increase in the age of retirement. While an increase in the age of retirement could affect the workforce and the number of older people working, it does not directly lead to an aging population. The aging of a population refers to the age structure, more elderly people compared to younger people, rather than changes in the retirement age. Although this could change labor force dynamics, it doesn't affect the overall age distribution in the same way a decline in birth rates does. Lastly, option D, an increase in the state pension. An increase in the state pension may benefit older individuals, but it does not directly contribute to an aging population. The aging population is driven by demographic factors like birth rates, life expectancy, and migration, not by changes in pension policy. However, better pension systems may help older individuals, but they don't directly cause an increase in the number of elderly people in the population. Moving to the 15th question. Iran has recently experienced a natural increase in population. What is the most likely cause of this increase? A. Emigration exceeded immigration. B. Immigration exceeded emigration. C. The birth rate exceeded the death rate. D. The death rate exceeded the birth rate. Reference, 2018 October-November version 1. The correct answer for this question is option C. The birth rate exceeded the death rate. A natural increase in population occurs when the birth rate exceeds the death rate. In other words, more people are being born than are dying, leading to population growth. This is the most likely cause of population growth in Iran, as it directly reflects the balance between births and deaths in the country. While other factors such as migration can also influence population size, natural increase is specifically driven by the difference between the number of births and deaths. Analyzing the other options. Option A, emigration exceeded immigration. If emigration exceeded immigration, this would likely lead to a population decrease, not an increase. When more people leave the country than enter, the population would shrink or stabilize, so this option does not explain a natural population increase. Next, option B, immigration exceeded emigration, could lead to population growth, but it refers to net migration rather than natural increase. The question specifically mentions a natural increase in population, which focuses on the birth rate and death rate, not migration. Immigration exceeding emigration would contribute to population growth, but it isn't the most likely cause of a natural increase. Lastly, option D. The death rate exceeded the birth rate. If the death rate exceeded the birth rate, the population would be declining over time, not increasing. A higher death rate than birth rate leads to population decline, so this cannot be the cause of a natural population increase. Thank you so much for watching this video on population on my channel, Topical Economics. I truly appreciate your time and attention as I walked through a few multiple choice questions, explaining which answers are correct and why the other options are incorrect. Your support means a lot, and I hope you found the explanations insightful and helpful in deepening your understanding of this important topic. If you have any questions or would like to see more content on similar economics topics, feel free to leave a comment or reach out. I'd love to hear your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to Topical Economics for more educational videos that break down complex concepts in a simple and engaging way. Thanks again for being part of the community.